folks, this is as part of the Climafix Summit. What we're trying to do is this year, the summit is actually held in September at IIT Madras like last year. Most of you guys, I think except Jacob and Vilas, I recall. Pradeep, I'm not sure if you are there for the last year's summit.
No, Narasimhan. I think Rohit was there.
Yeah, Rohit was there, partner.
Yeah.
So this year it's held. This is the second edition for the Climafix Summit. This is 2023 edition is in September. It's held, organized along with IIT Madras Energy Consortium, and it's held at the IIT Madras Research Park in Chennai. So what we're trying to do, folks, essentially is having some panel discussions in the run-up to the event. Last year, we had a very, should we say, hectic event. There were almost 10 panel discussions and 10 startup pitch sessions. So it's like 20 sessions in 2 days. What we are doing this year is to take off all the panel discussions, because basically the response and the feedback we got was, look, if this is a startup event, let it be mostly about startup presentations rather than panel discussions, because most of us are here to meet startups. We can probably go to other places to gain knowledge. So that was the feedback we got, right? So the idea was keep maybe the panel discussions away and instead have a lot of breakout sessions where people can network with each other. So what we have done, Himanshu, as I had also mentioned to you earlier, all those panel discussions have been taken off, and all of them have been replaced with breakout sessions. Of course, they have themes as well, but these are going to be far more interactive. But what we felt is, look, panel discussions have a very big role to play. This is where you get a lot of intelligence at one place. And so we didn't really have the heart not have the panel discussions. What we decided is, why don't we have panel discussions in the run-up to the event, right? We have panel discussions. We can even have multiple panel discussions, because today technology can help enable us do that. And then maybe get all of you guys over there. We have some summaries, and maybe during the breakout sessions, we can use the inputs from the panel discussions as a key value. So that's the idea. Without much ado, let me start it off. That's the background. We have about 45 minutes. I'll make sure that I finish it sharp by 3:30, so that if you guys have anything else to complete, you can go ahead. So idea is, today we are looking at low carbon mobility as the theme, and I'm looking at having a minimum of 2 of these sessions. So today is going to be the first. I'm looking at maybe one more, and if you all can afford it, maybe have even a third, and basically take it forward. The first session today, the first panel discussion today, can be a context setting panel discussion. As I mentioned, I have sent you a few broad themes on which we can set the context on how best low carbon mobility can provide a high impact on both environmental and decarbonization avenues or domains. And once we finish this, maybe we can take the inputs from here and see how we can articulate the next 2 panel discussions. So I'm not going to talk anything much more than that. I'm going to first request each of you guys, Pradeep, Jacob, Rahil, Vilas, and Himanshu, to maybe, take a couple of minutes, introduce yourself, even though some of you may know each other, introduce your company, what it's doing right now. In fact, once you guys finish, I can string it all together. There is a very nice connect I'm seeing, but I would request maybe starting with Pradeep. Shall we start?
Sure. Yep. Hey guys, so I'm Pradeep, co-founder of Aerostravelos Energy Private Limited. So we are an IIT Madras incubated company, and we are specifically working on a low carbon solution for the trucking industry. And the approach is fairly different, in some sense unique to us. So we are looking at basically aircraft engines as our core technology. And in the industrial classification, it is called micro gas turbines. So we are looking at these micro gas turbines as an onboard powering a power generator system for long haul trucks, rather than a fuel cell or a battery. So we kind of position our technology as a turbine electric vehicle, where the turbine being our technology, and the front end is the electronics that that kind of generally drives the electric buses and the trucks. So some sense the advantages is we will still be able to extremely be light, like the reciprocating engines, which are currently as a solution. But one of the core technology that we are bringing in from our side is that we are offering fuel flexibility. So the current trucks can go from diesel to natural gas all the way up to hydrogen without any huge modification. Definitely, you will have to replace a tank, the fuel tank and the fuel age system. But other than that, the core engine remains the same and the other aspects of the truck remains the same. So we are not only positioning ourselves as a low emission, low carbon strategy, but also a transition technology that can basically take it from current day diesel, which is the maximum availability, all the way up to hydrogen. So we kind of, in some sense, also solve the chicken and egg problem with our approach. I take care of operations in Aeros Travelers. I have a manufacturing background. I've worked with multiple startups, from controls, power electronics, to basically manufacturing. Welding is my core competency, and manufacturing. So I've been started my career in 2007, but have been with Aeros Travelers from about 2017 all the way until now. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Pradeep. Rahil?
Hey, Nasi, thanks for having me here. So I'm Rahil. I co-founded a company called Hop Electric Mobility. So we are into electric vehicles, pure. The portfolio consists of electric two-wheelers, both motorcycle and scooters. We've been in operation for past 3 years. We have distribution pan-India. Started with the aim of doing battery swapping. Quickly realized swapping actually only makes sense on the application base. So we sell both with and without swapping currently. Our major operations are based from Rajasthan. So our R&D is from Jaipur and Gurgaon, and our production facility is from Jaipur. Right now, we are expanding our footprints internationally. So we have orders and we have distribution across Africa, Southeast Asia, and US. Currently, the flagship product is Hop Oxo, which is one of the top 3 electric motorcycles in India, in production, in retail, and quickly expanding the portfolio for next year.
Thank you, Rahul. Jacob?
Hello everyone, I am Jacob Titekada. I am co-founder and CEO of Sugra Mobility Private Limited. Sugra is into last mile mobility solutions for goods below 300 kilos. Our product are pedal assisted tricycles. Basically, tricycle that can carry around 300 kilos of load. It is pedal assisted. It has a motor, battery pack, and we are, I think, India's only solar powered pedal assisted 3-wheeler company. So our vehicle can be charged using solar panels. It is purely renewable energy. It runs on. The vehicle gives close to around 100 kilometers a day, carrying around a weight of 150 kilos, which is a very good solution for fleet operations, garbage collection, vegetable vendors, fruit vendors. So those are the solar powered vehicle, the electric vehicle, and the pure manual tricycle. Those 3 are our initial products. We just started selling our product. We have recently entered the market and looking forward to how it turns out. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jacob. Himanshu, I'm going to skip you and go to Vilas because you are the odd man out here. Vilas?
Yes, thank you for having me here. I'm Vilas Deshpande. I'm a co-founder and COO of Wave Mobility. We are located in Pune, and Wave Mobility is focusing on creating a new category of urban commuter vehicles in India and overseas. The area of focus for us is mini mobility. So these are 4-wheeled vehicles that typically carry about 2 or 3 passengers. The intent here is to really bring low carbon transportation in the hands of people who need them. This is the perfect kind of location between 2-wheelers and a full-sized car. The benefits that we get out of a vehicle like this is that we are very efficient on the use of resources. We obviously have a very safe vehicle because it is a covered cabin, and it also has the comforts of a entry-level hatchback or even a premium hatchback with all of the electronics that typically we expect in a car, air-conditioned cabin, and so forth. And then the other benefit is in terms of energy efficiency. We are amongst the highest energy efficiencies in the class of vehicles here. So that is about 20 kilometers per kilowatt hour. And then finally, it is very economical in the use of infrastructure. So when we're navigating crowded roads or difficult to park places, a small car can manage it much better than a full 5-seater vehicle. So we introduced our first vehicle in the Delhi Auto Expo in January. It is our first car, and it is also India's first solar electric car. So what we have been able to do with the high efficiency is to incorporate a solar panel on the roof, and that provides about a 1/3 of the annual driving needs of a typical city driver in India. So that's where we are. We are in development right now, and we expect to bring the vehicle to market in about 24 months from now. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Vilas. Thank you very much. That's such a cute product. Himanshu?
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Nasi, for first of all inviting me. And hi everyone, nice to meet you. I've met Rahil and Pradeep before, but nice to meet you again, both of you guys, and nice to meet you, Vilas and
Likewise.
Jacob as well. A quick about us, like I'm the odd one out from the entire group. So we are the investors. So I'll just start with our firm. So I represent Thea Ventures. So I'm from the investment team of Thea Ventures. We are a climate tech focused fund. Is a fund we started 2 years back. Since the last 2 years, we have deployed in 8 companies now, recently closed the eighth one last month. And in terms of the areas which we have invested in, so the 4 key areas in which we made the investment. First is the EV. In case of EV, we have 3 portfolio companies. One is Exponent Energy, 15-minute charging solution. The second one is Sheru, bidirectional flow of energy from a B2G model. Started as a battery swapping company, do have a battery swapping on the top of it, and another software layer to help the grids or the IPPs in terms of the grid stability. And then the third area is the battery recycling in EV, where we have invested in as a part of the circular economy thesis. The company name is Metastable Materials. Then in energy, we have invested in 2 companies. Probus, which works on the smart meters along with Adani Power and Tata Power, and then EdgeGrid, which is into demand energy response management, works with the commercial building owners. In case of carbon markets, we've invested with this company called Varaha. They help the farmers generate the carbon credits from a nature-based solutions. And then in the last part, which is the alternate materials, we have invested in 2 companies. One is yet to be closed out, and the other one is into the sustainable fashion space. So they uses the hemp, banana, pineapple, these kind of a ways to generate a fiber out of it, which goes to brands like Irving, Target, Gap, and H&M. So these are the broad subsectors of climate which we have invested in. As a climate tech investor, we are open to investing in everything. We are more of a B2B investors, and we are morely a seed stage investor. We have done a pre-seed investment as well, but primarily we are a seed stage investor. Also, we are in a process of raising a bigger round as well in terms of our next fundraise. This is more from the investment side of Thea. From a non-investment side of Thea, climate is something which is very new sector in India. So thought leadership need to be developed and people need to be educated also what's happening around it. It's like no one better than a founder to educate it, but as an investor, we also try to pitch in that thing. So we do a couple of thought leadership and everything. And one key area in the thought leadership, which we actively believe is policy is one of the key elements of climate. And being policy is one of the key element of climate, we have an active partnership with this organization called Observer Research Foundation, which is one of the think tanks based out of India and US. And we do a lot amount of events with them, thought leadership and everything to act to also help more of a policymakers understand what's the ground level problems are there from an investor side as well, and also from a founder side as well. So this is a quick about the Ventures.
Thank you very much. I think all you guys must have gone through a lot of elevator pitch practices because the 5 introductions got over within 12 minutes. Usually when I say take a couple of minutes, guys, in a typical forum, the couple of minutes is never a couple of minutes. It keeps running for 4 or 5 minutes. But here you guys have actually taken less than 2 minutes on average. Very good. Thank you very much. Except the investor, of course, who took, I think, 3 minutes, but then, he has the money with him. That's fine. We will allow him a minute more for that. All right. Thank you. But it was very good. You guys were added a lot of value in introductions. So you see, I'm a bit on a dilemma because actually some of what you guys mentioned, especially, I mean, be it Pradeep's or Rahil's or Jacob's or Vilas for that matter. I think there are some questions I have which probably I'm very curious to ask as well, but perhaps they can wait for the next session. I'm really hoping that all you guys can assemble 2 or 3 weeks later as a continuation. Because, I mean, what Vilas is talking about or Jacob is talking about, they're all niche markets, not as much explored as, or for that matter, what Pradeep is talking about. They're not fully explored yet. So I have a lot of questions. I'm sure each of you has questions for others as well. Let's hope we have some time today. But the way I was thinking about the whole thing, guys, is I was telling you guys also, I already have, I'm seeing actually a nice string that I can connect all of you with. And that's fairly obvious. You have a two-wheeler guy in Rahil, you have a three-wheeler guy in Jacob, you have a four-wheeler guy in Vilas, and in Pradeep, you have a guy who can actually put a stuff on vehicles with many more than four wheels. That's the idea, right? So
Yes.
essentially, in a way, even though that wasn't really the idea, what we have over here is actually the complete set of vehicles that one can think about, from light two-wheelers all the way to heavy commercial vehicles. What I have in mind today, and this is something that came from the reading, all of you probably would have heard about it. This, I think, was starkly represented in I think a PwC State of Climate report 2 years back or something like that, where it said, look, 60% of all investments, especially venture capital investments, are going into electric mobility, whereas transport actually gives rise to only 16 to 20% of emissions. Yeah, so in a way, while transport is a critical area, what the report was mentioning is that the interest in that segment is far more than its decarbonization potential, which means, well, you guys are in the spotlight. But 16 to 20% is still a large number, right? 16 to 20%, 25%, even if it's 25%, it's still a large number when it comes to emissions. At the same time, guys, there are some other numbers, and that is where maybe Pradeep's solutions could be interesting. 2% of all the vehicles on Indian roads are trucks.
Yep.
Heavy vehicles, but they give rise to 40% of all the CO2 emissions from road transport. Right? This again is probably something that many of you know. And then we have, of course, the fact that each of these, be it cars, be it three-wheelers, while they may, for instance, two or three-wheelers, they may not really be individually or even as a collective group resulting in dramatic decarbonization, but then they can significantly help in environmental pollution. So the question I have, guys, is, without really stressing it too far, what are your thoughts on the extent of decarbonization or environmental remediation that each of your solutions is giving rise to today? And more importantly, what are the innovations that you guys are looking at? It can be a business model innovation, it can be a technology innovation. What are the innovations you guys are looking at which can significantly increase the impact, the environmental or the emissions impact from your solutions or your category? It may not be only for your solution, from your category of solutions. I'll repeat it just so that I myself am clear about what I'm talking about. One, we all know that each of you guys represent an important part of the mobility ecosystem. All the same, where do you see innovations happening for your company or in your ecosystem that can significantly increase the impact of decarbonization or environmental remediation of your specific solution or your category of solutions? Does it make sense, the question? You see, the reason I ask this is, many times when we go to all these electric vehicle shows, the talk starts revolving around, okay, what is the range, what is the price? All those are important, no doubt, otherwise the sector cannot scale. But at the end of the day, why are we doing all this? We are doing it to reduce emissions, to increase the environmental quality around us. So I thought if we can also focus on how innovations are driving the electric mobility segment towards these two big goals, it could help. So why don't we start with maybe Rahil? Rahil seems to have shifted from somewhere else along the way. The whole picture seems to be shuffling around. So maybe we can start again clockwise. We'll start with Rahil. I would you guys can answer it the way you want it, but this is broadly the question. Rahil, can we start with you?
Sure. So good question actually. We battle with that every day. So electric vehicles have zero tailpipe emissions. That is very obvious, and people only cite that part of it. But one thing we have to fight, and one thing we have to work for as an industry is we have to also take care of manufacturing perspectives, where electric vehicles emit a little bit more emissions than in manufacturing than say a regular petrol car. And the reason being the petrol car assembly lines and manufacturing processes are to have optimized for the millions and millions of cycles they have evolved from the last 40 years. Electric vehicle processes, those duty cycles are being evolved as we speak today because those are not exactly made the similar way that petrol cars were made. So, and industrial and manufacturing capability and industrial and manufacturing emissions are one of the highest when you consider whole climate ecosystem after probably energy or at par with energy. So I think we need to start from there, working on the supply chain and value chain and cracking what all leakages, what all emissions are to be taken care of. I think that require a fundamental shift in how we use energy, how we distribute energy, also how we use other materials, like using green hydrogen for that matter, may also solve all of those issues with steel. Because any of the parts we assemble today are the raw materials which industries take for granted. And if you actually cut down those bigger emissions, it's just a matter of time the whole supply chain cleans up. That perspective coupled with digital decarbonization for roof optimization and all the energy efficiency built in, I think can actually cut a lot of manufacturing based emissions. Electric vehicle, the majority part of those emissions go into battery production. And once you understand why battery production is so dirty today, because they consume a lot of energy and a lot of natural resources like water and the gas. We need to structure that and clean that up step by step. So first thing, energy is a bigger problem. Our grids are still 50% or more coal based. Even the China, which are producing a lot of batteries, are coal based. So how do we clean that energy so that the energy going into battery production cleans up? Second, when you transport and use that energy into an electric vehicle, how do you manufacture those cells into say, the raw materials into the cells and then cells into the battery pack has to clean up. And end of life of these batteries, as Himanshu was mentioning, they're investing into companies which are actually into circular economy or recycling those battery packs. We call them urban mining because in India, you may not find natural resources or rare earth metals, but we may have a lot of urban mines which we can use and recycle from the already consumer electronics which have batteries, which we might use. So the circular economy have to be drastically focused on because once we clean that up, a lot of reduction would happen in say that value chain, and that is more important than say even the tailpipe because a vehicle produces probably more emissions in manufacturing. It's a fun fact, but a vehicle produces more emissions being manufactured than the tailpipe it will ever produce in its lifetime. And I'm talking about say a two-wheeler. I don't have exact figures, but it was said that in order to compensate for the tailpipe emissions, it's around 7 years of vehicles running on road to offset the manufacturing emissions that have been done throughout the value chain. And 7 years, like around, we consider the life of a two-wheeler is around 7 to 8 years. So all of that life, that vehicle is just trying to compensate for the manufacturing emissions it has tried. So we might want to start from a supply chain and value chain and then move on to say, because tailpipes are the easier part. We might not emit emissions, but the battery which goes into the system, the electricity we get for assembling the vehicles and getting all the manufacturing processes done. The gases and the water we require for all of those battery production needs to be cleaned up, needs to be circular, and needs to come in a way that we don't stress the environment, we don't stress the local area, and we don't stress the resources too much so that we are just compensating on the tailpipe. So that's my 2 cents to start with. That we really want to go deeper into the supply chain, how we use our energy, how we transport that, how we use our materials, how we transport that, and how we use our resources, how we transport that. When we start with there, a lot of solutions are available today. They might be expensive, but when you capitalize that over a long period of time, because it's a long lead game, and mobility being one of the top uters, it can be capitalized well. So when you capitalize that, the solution or the green premium can be reduced, and that might actually be the bigger impact creator than say normal just putting a vehicle out there, because a vehicle out there is still a vehicle, and you might not, it's still inefficient in terms of how many vehicles will you need or will you require on the road, right? So my starting point would be to look into supply chain and utilize the assets and resources carefully. And once you start doing that, other things fall into place.
Very interesting. Yeah, very interesting. I think many of you will definitely agree with you. The supply chain, as you rightly pointed out, the embedded energy in a car, be it in the batteries or in the car itself, probably is worth a few years of emissions. So that definitely is a very large component, and innovations around that could make a big difference. Vilas, you're muted, Vilas.
Okay, so continuing on the thread that Rahil was talking about, I think there are a couple of things. I'll start with one thing though, is the intent and the vision that we have is to right-size vehicles, particularly in this case, city commuter cars, to the job that is required. Typical usage of vehicles with cars on the road. You look around whenever you're in traffic, you'll see no more than 1 or 2 people in a car. So we are right-sizing the vehicle so that it is only sized to carry 1 or 2 people. And that is really the start of getting an efficient vehicle that people would then be able to drive around, enjoy having one, and also have the benefits of electric mobility at the same time. So that is the core vision. But I think the deeper question about efficiency and about impact, there are 2 things that I'd like to talk about. Number one is really what is the life cycle emissions that the vehicle has compared to an alternate. So we've done some preliminary analysis here, and I think I can quote a very good example that we should all go and look at. It's a website called carboncounter.com. It's a website created by an MIT research lab. And what this really does is it creates a life cycle analysis of multiple vehicles. Now, granted, this study is for the US, but there's no reason why we couldn't do something here in India. So the idea is to create a life cycle analysis from the cradle to the grave of each vehicle, and then count what is the overall impact in terms of carbon emissions from that vehicle from the point of production to the point that it is scrapped. And obviously for electric vehicle, that includes the starting points of getting battery raw materials and to the end point of end of life of the battery. When we do an assessment on life cycle analysis, and again, we have to be careful to define the boundaries very well here. There can be ways to influence the outcomes, but that's where a peer-reviewed study really comes into play to make sure that we put the right boundary conditions on a life cycle analysis. Once we do that correct kind of a study, we find that an electric vehicle, whether in India or in the US, typically using about similar energy input for the electric vehicle, which is typically from coal. That difference between an electric vehicle and another internal combustion engine vehicle is typically around 1 to 2 tons of CO2 equivalent emissions per year of its average usage. And that is spread out over a lifetime of about 10 years, let's say. It could be much longer sometimes, but that's the lifetime impact of a life cycle analysis of 10 tons of CO2 emissions avoided by an electric vehicle versus an internal combustion engine. So I think that is the key starting point, a very good set of fundamental data that needs to be there to do this comparison. The second part then goes on for the public health impact of electric vehicles that sometimes doesn't get really counted. When you look at replacing hundreds of thousands and even millions of internal combustion engine vehicles from city roads, and particularly in our crowded cities, there is a very direct and material reduction in emissions, in tailpipe emissions on the road. That cumulatively starts clearing up the air. One of the best examples that I sometimes use is if you think back to the tragic time of COVID lockdown, the air was crystal clear all around the country. From Punjab, you could see some places you could see the Himalayas. So why was that possible? Because vehicles were off the road. We could achieve similar levels of clean air by moving a vast majority of our of our internal combustion engine vehicles to electric vehicles in the future. And that is a very big factor, I think, in terms of both public health and carbon emissions that we can look at. One last thing that I would like to mention here is also another element of improvement that we are looking at Wave Mobility, and that is access to mobility. This is a social impact that we have to really think about. Typically, we think that two-wheelers provide very good mobility in the country, right? And that is true. But if you look at the majority of two-wheeler riders, those are young males or typically young to middle-aged males who are able to use a two-wheeler and be very good at using that as a way to get around. Cars provide a lot better opportunity for women to get around, but those can also be a barrier because of a large vehicle, crowded traffic, and so forth. So what we are trying to do is to bring a vehicle that is small enough that everybody should feel comfortable handling, and then provide access to mobility, which provides in turn access to social mobility upward, access to economic opportunities in terms of jobs, and in general productivity of a population. So those are a few things that we are considering when we think about what kind of vehicle we want to bring to the roads in India.
Very interesting. You raised 3 points. One is, of course, right sizing the vehicle itself, which can obviously result in, be it batteries or gasoline, you require less fuel to travel around. Second is, of course, the air pollution aspect, which normally doesn't get discussed. You see, even if the electric vehicle is powered by a coal power plant, as it is today in India, now the fact is you are shifting pollution, no doubt, but at least you are reducing the health hazard, right? You are shifting pollution to the coal power plant, sure, that is still pollution, but it's not pollution on the road. I am not inhaling it when I'm walking. So even on an apples to apples comparison, where an electric vehicle is still getting powered by a coal power plant, there is some element of environmental remediation as it does. And as it gets more and more powered by solar, it becomes even better. And finally, you mentioned the social impact, which I guess is a very interesting point. I have not thought about it. So essentially, you are saying, let's look at impact on 3 parameters. One, the size of the vehicle itself. Why can't I have an optimum vehicle, optimum size vehicle? Look at air pollution as a point of innovation. And finally, the social impact. Very interesting. Let's move on to Pradeep.
If I could add one more thing that you just mentioned, in terms of shifting pollution from this point of use of road to a coal power plant, there's also a very big difference in the efficiency of the vehicle, of the drivetrain. So in terms of well-to-wheel efficiency, an electric vehicle is far higher. It can get as close to, I would say, about 80 or maybe even higher percentage versus for an internal combustion engine, that is only 20%. So the rest of it is being wasted as heat, noise, and emissions. So I think that's another important point to remember.
Correct. Absolutely. Pradeep?
Yes. Yeah. So I would like to start by one actually post that Narasimhan you had posted, sir. So it kind of went around to do climate activists do more harm than good. That was the post you get, and kind of I opted for something on line of misguidance. I think intelligent people being misguided, but once I answered it, the poll was quite interesting. The answers you had was quite interesting because close to 50% people were just on the fence. Yeah, neither here, not there. And the other 50% fairly were saying that, yes, they do more good. And the other, actually, of the 50, 20, I think 23, were saying that yes, they do good, they do bad. Okay, so kind of an interesting analogy. And I think one major aspect that kind of overall clouds us is there is a lot of misinformation. Um, there is a lot of acceptance in what we are going ahead with our current technologies and other things, and we are not entirely looking at in as a holistic view, in some sense, where we are kind of moving the pollution right now. The game is moving the pollution. So if you actually look at it, when the horse carriages were used, the biggest problem people faced in the city was horse shit, basically. So I have this analogy as, where is the horse shit? The same way, we are right now, what we are trying to do is basically more or less moving the pollution off from the cities to the urban areas. But even I'm not completely saying that there are other solutions coming up, but fairly the focus is going that way when it comes to an overall perspective on where do I kind of move it, how quick I can move it, and other things, because the more of the norms, policies, and other things are generally not divided when it comes to city versus urban areas. So in terms of as electrification comes in, there is going to be a lot of stress in other rural areas where the power plants are located, where basically the materials are coming from, and aspect of it. Not claiming to have any solution or any particular saying that this technology is right or things, but I think what we also need to be very, very mindful is about accepting that every aspect has its impact, and ensuring that we address that impact without covering it fairly. Whereas the misguidance fairly at least disappears, because overstating any technology, likewise, which is generally, like you said, EV mobility getting undue advantage over basically other technology, even though it is not 100% emission free things, will fairly disappear when front runners accept that it's not perfect, but we're trying to get there. Being open about it, I think, is fairly very, very important, as much as innovators putting the best technology out there, accepting what is real, what is realistic, going with, yes, this is possible, we are working towards it, and basically enabling a better future. We were all working for enabling better future, because even as the hydrogen has its own, the hydrogen, that the messiah of all fuels, basically, which people talk about and other things, have a huge amount of disadvantage in terms of where is going to be the fresh water coming from. Are you going to be going and looking at like how biofuels basically failed because you started kind of occupying vegetation areas? Hydrogen will also come to an extent where the fresh water is going to come from, and that is a huge challenge which we'll have to say. And each of that has its own plus and minus. And I think balancing it well and ensuring that we do not overplay what a particular solution can basically solve would be, I think, the biggest factor in fighting climate.
So what you're saying, Pradeep, is we, on balance, you're saying we may be good in some aspects of the value chain. It may have some other challenges elsewhere. But when we talk about innovation, we cannot look at it in compartments. We cannot look at them in silos. Whether it's you call it innovation, whether you call it initiatives, you have to see. Finally finally what is the balance? Yeah, as you said, hydrogen might be doing very well when it comes to powering cars or even boilers or furnaces, but then is somebody else getting hurt elsewhere?
Yes.
In fact, in hydrogen, I even heard there is a good amount of research we do here, and where if there is a hydrogen leak, right, even a small amount of hydrogen leak, apparently what happens is it results in a chemical reaction, and finally it results in methane, which
Yes.
is a powerful greenhouse gas.
That's
So
10 times more.
hydrogen leaks can lead to a lot of carbonization instead of decarbonization. So we are talking about large-scale transport of hydrogen and use of hydrogen. What happens if there are small leaks and the amount of CH4 that goes into the atmosphere from there could easily nullify all the decarbonization benefits we get from elsewhere. So I agree with you. I think it's a very challenging time. We have to look at the whole thing holistically. Jacob, what about you? Where do you see innovations either in your sector, around your sector, which can result in a high impact on decarbonization or environmental safety?
Thank you, Narsi, and hi everybody. Very wonderful and engaging discussion that we are having here. I have to agree with all the panelists, and I appreciate Rahul for bringing out that dirty side of battery. I actually agree with Vilas, and I continue in the thought process of right sizing. That is a philosophy which Sugra Mobility is also focusing on, wherein which we find that for most of the application, we are using oversized or unnecessary huge vehicles to transport items. So having the right vehicle for moving the goods will paves a way in challenging the climate crisis. That is something we are seeing across even in Europe. You can see a lot of cycling lanes and pedal vehicles coming up in big way in Europe. So most of the time, we can do a job in a much more energy efficient manner if the vehicle is small, because the goods that we are carrying, the people that we are moving around is not that big. You don't need such big vehicles. That is one aspect. The second aspect that I would like to talk about is we didn't talk about the energy that is being generated for using the vehicle. We have to seriously look at renewables, and it is a big thing. For example, if you look at pedal assisted vehicles, I say from that point of view because I have clear hands on the numbers and figures. We can use solar powered vehicles for most of the application which is below 500 kilos. It is easily possible. You can easily get around 50, 60, 100, 120 kilometers using solar power. This we are talking about absolutely zero carbon energy being generated without stressing out the grid, without having any other issues. So we need to really focus on the renewable parts when we talk about decarbonizing and going for solving the climate issue. And the other aspect which I felt is, see, the future is definitely electric. That's my personal feel. But now the battery part, that is highly evolving. I will not say that the future is the current lithium ferrous phosphate battery that is going to power. No, I don't feel so. I feel it is highly evolving. But it is definitely electric because electric is highly efficient. Whatever energy you give into it, it converts around 80 to 95% of it into mobility. So definitely it is electric. The battery part is highly evolving now when you look at it, or if you look at the energy storage side of it, say like 5 years or 10 years down the line, I think it would be drastically different from what we are talking now. We are talking about solid state batteries coming in, and so I'm very optimistic that that dirty side of battery we will definitely take care of with our intelligent minds working together. But if you look at the few points that I would like to stress is the right size of the vehicle to be used, increasing of pedaling, then looking at the non-renewable, the renewable source of energy that can be used for powering our vehicle. Finally, I would like to add, it's like we need to increase the public transport. That's my personal feel, because most of the time we are relying a lot on personal mobility, which stresses out the entire climate and the ecosystem. A proper metro system, a proper public transport would reduce the congestion, would reduce the carbon that goes into cities, and it would make a much more merrier and happier living place. Those are my few cents. Thank you.
Very nice, very nice. So right sizing, that's very similar to what Vilas said. You brought in renewable energy, which is far more, I guess, applicable in your case. So I think you could speak with a lot more conviction there because you are running light vehicles within closed spaces or at least within fixed spaces, and probably you can have a decent amount of energy probably contributed right from the rooftop of a vehicle itself. So I think yeah, it's quite possible the renewable energy part of it. And thirdly, you mentioned the public transport. That's well, that's I don't know how easy it is. By the way, I go by bus most of the time these days, and it's not very convenient. I can tell you. I deliberately, well, it so happened that for a week I was supposed to go by bus sometime 3 months back, and until then I had not traveled by bus not in a big way at least. And then I realized actually there is a bus that goes straight from my office to my home. And then I've been taking it, well, partly because it's cheap, yeah, partly because it's not so difficult to use it in terms of at least the scheduling. But I can tell you sometimes it's inconvenient. It can be extremely crowded. How much we can, folks like us who are used to slightly better quality of life, can we do it day in and day out? I'm not sure. Metro, probably yes. Metro is quite a different proposition. It's far less congested, and with air conditioning and all, it's probably better. But yes, public transport definitely is something that one can think about. It's some innovations in that, what can be done that can really move the needle on emissions and decarbonization. That's for a different day. We have done some work in the public transport itself. There are some good global case studies where some of the large cities in the world have been able to move the needle to some extent. That's for a different day, as I said, since we have another 5-7 minutes. So Himanshu, I come back to you once again. Lastly, this time you happen to be the last in the clockwise direction. So I didn't really have to skip you before I came to you. What are your thoughts, Himanshu? So you guys are investing. You see, you have to
Hmm.
play a balanced role. On one hand, you have your investors, your LPs, you have all those guys to take care of and their aspirations. But then their aspirations are also partly environmental, partly monetary. At the same time, you guys do your own research. You have a massive interest in climate. How do you look at the whole thing when it comes to electric mobility, especially? There are sectors that are exciting from a consumer point of view, but they may or may not be exciting from a decarbonization point of view. How do you guys look at balancing the whole thing?
Got it. Sure, sure. First of all, thanks, Anastasi, again for the inviting me on the panel. So really, really amazing discussion, hearing all the four founders. I think I'll just pick up firstly on the last point which Jacob mentioned, and then want to cover up a basic idea also around where we are seeing an innovation. So there's this one quote or maybe sort of a statement which I read somewhere that a father is saving 20 rupees and walking 5 minutes out there, and a son is spending 20 minutes and saving 5 minutes out. Both are doing the same thing, or both are actually right. One is giving a preference to a convenience, one is giving a preference to the saving which is there. So the point which is there, a little bit of a change which is happening, and to the point which Vilas also mentioned and Jacob also mentioned, is that um, as a mobility, we need to understand the targeted group for which we are making a solution. This coming generation values convenience a lot. And I'm just going a little bit off climate out there. We have seen different models out there, consumer, etc., and all those things. We're ready to pay convenience if something out there. Classic example, I was there for a visa visit today. Someone asked me that, can you give this sort of services so it will help you to save time a little bit? Why wouldn't I pay for it? Because I'm saving a time for that particular thing. So I think an understanding of a target group, whether it's going to be a solar powered vehicle, whether it's going to be a two-wheeler, whether it's going to be a four-wheeler, whether it's going to be for a fleet, whether it's going to be a personality, one size fit all doesn't apply in case of mobility. It might be a case which was very different in case of an IC, but it would be very different in case of an entire electric vehicle. Like battery swapping will be a solution. At the same point in time, fast charging will also be a solution. At that point in time, having a charger at your home will also be a solution. Someone would prefer to charge like for 6 hours also, and someone would love to charge it for like 15 minutes also. So the point is, when they're trying to make is the solution should be driven towards what kind of a customer they are targeting and what kind of customer they are looking for, which is there. Along with that thing, starting coming broadly from a top to down approach, generally from an investor mindset, that the ecosystem for mobility in case of an IC is fundamentally different what it will be in case of an EV. It was very easy to go for a drilling area, get out the oil, go to the pick up the supply chain, go out there, put up a petrol. I'm not saying it's that easy, but trying to put it in a comparative way, that it is like putting up a station, and this has taken quite a few years with such amount of capitalism around it to make this an infrastructure, because the amount of profits or the amount of incentives which are involved were quite high. But now when it comes to a case of an EV, it's totally different. We need to understand firstly from a mindset of how to develop that infrastructure. At the second point in time, how to make sure that the circular economy angle comes out there. Coming back to the point which Rahul also mentioned, that we definitely need a greener supply chain in this thing. This is one area, Narsi, to your question, okay, this where we as an investor want to see or are looking for the innovations. That how can you extract a particular level of lithium, cobalt, nickel from the battery again, because we as a country don't have the supply chain or don't have the availability for these materials. But we don't have to be so much dependent on the outside India world for our batteries, and we need to manufacture our batteries on our own. This is one of the example which is there from a policy perspective, which is being done by US as well, by the bipartisan law, which comes as a part of their entire anti-China policy for that. Now, second, at that point in time, we have batteries. For an example, at this point, we have batteries, we have everything. But at this point in time, the right optimization of that battery is important. Like the way a right optimization of an engine came with a certain sort of efficiency, mileage, and everything, we need that the right sort of optimization of a battery should also happen. Now, this is where a top amount of it or a top solution comes out there is the battery intelligence. So take an example, if it's a two-wheeler scooter, two-wheeler or three-wheeler or four-wheeler, or whatever vehicle is there, can someone say to a battery aggregator at this point in time that please don't take the next cab ride, right? Because it might not be feasible for you to take a cab ride because that might impact the batteries altogether. Comes as a standard concept of a battery that you don't have to charge a battery to its fullest, right? Because it reduces the life of a battery. Something of that sort. I think that sort of second level of a battery intelligence is something which is required to make the life of a battery longer as well and make this entire supply chain greener. And another third point, which is where as an innovation to be seen is like Narsi, when you started that the 16% of the number or 2% coming from the trucking solution, everything. I think most of the time the key challenge which is there, and Vilas, I think really rightly you mentioned about that website. The biggest challenge with climate is the the entire LCA part of it. You cannot track that if a battery is made, that is just the mitigation which has done just because of that battery implementation. You have energy around it, you have that entire manufacturing around it for that thing. Just for an example, if you want to take, if you're manufacturing a car, it's not just you're just removing the drive chain on the top of it. You have the seat covers coming from the polyester that comes as a part of one of the industry which is there of the entire climate, which is of the alt material for that thing. So you need to understand the entire supply chain of an automotive to first understand that how much of a mitigation is going to bring in, because the problem with climate or a challenge with climate is everything is linked. So you can't see them in compartments. You need to provide an holistic solution into it. While it's a very tough problem to solve it, but I think the part over there is, which I'm thinking is couple of solutions are coming out there, at least at a silo level right now, but later on they might all just come together and provide a better solution for us. So I think that's one area which we are seeing, that even in an ancillary market, how can we have a better products out there? Better products for the vehicle control unit, better products at a sensor level, better products at a seat cover level. Just for the even better example, one of the recent articles came out there that one of the key areas in the entire EV we haven't taken a look at is the tires for that thing, because they come as a part of the significant carbon emissions for that. So I think that's one area from where we are seeing like an alt material as a category where the solutions are also coming for. And then want to cover one of the key things which was also mentioned about the infrastructure development around vehicles. So, like take an example, we have somewhat like around 22 lakh vehicles, registered EV vehicles in India. At that point in time, the public charging infrastructure, if I remember the number correctly, after the March numbers, there's around like 6,000 public charging infrastructure. And of that, rest of the out of the 10,000 are being operated privately in. But the point is, we on an average, if we consider, we have 200 electric vehicles on one charging infrastructure, which is a high number at this point in time. The next key thing from a policy perspective, which needs a sort of intervention, is those charging infrastructure to be developed. Whether it more in sort of take an example, whether it's going to go to public, whether it's going to be come by the subsidies and everything, that's a different question. But I think that's one area, if that comes as a part of the policy, which is where we'll see a lot amount of innovations also coming in. This is where energy storage is one of the solution which we have also invested. Sheru is one of our portfolio companies. I think, Nasi, just to broadly answer this thing, these are a couple of areas which we are looking at this point in time from energy, from different solutions perspective, be it battery intelligence, be it like alt materials, be it like the EV. I think the good part which is there in India, and I think Rahil might add it to that point, is we have very good founders basically at this point in time, who has developed a solution to solve it for EV OEM. We have EV OEMs now. The point is the help which a founder community at this point in time need is the ecosystem need to be developed around it, because so that the even at that point in time the adoption should increase. Very just ending on my on that note is recently the subsidies in case of an EV two-wheeler three-wheeler has reduced in terms of the percentage. Now, at that point in time, we need EV financing on the top of it. But the EV financing is a little bit complex part because these assets are not yet have developed a secondary market for that thing. So we need a business model innovation also at that point in time. So this comes as a part of the fourth solution which we as an investor are looking for. So that the entire EV ecosystem can thrive ultimately.
Got it. Got it. So that's, I can see that you have done a lot of research on the various buckets. Interesting. Some of the buckets you covered, such as taking a more holistic view of the supply chain. I think Rahil and Vilas mentioned, and some of them you mentioned very interesting points. The optimization part was something very interesting. So whatever I am using, is the motor, is it optimized? Is the engine optimized? And also looking at the infra part of it, and the ancillaries part of it. That's the other thing. So we normally don't look at tires. We don't normally don't look at brakes. All these are part of the vehicle. So it's a very interesting 4 or 5 buckets you looked at. I'm going to close this, guys. We have run out of time. I don't want you guys to be held back from whatever else you have. But let me take just a couple of minutes. Firstly, thank you very much once again. It's really a pleasure. It really was very interesting to listen to all of you guys. Now that it's recorded, we can go back and listen over and over again. But from a quick bullet points perspective, Rahul looked at supply chain as a key thing. Innovations are required upstream if you have to really cut down the carbon footprint and the environmental footprint. Vilas looked the key point, and it's very interesting point he looked at is we're right sizing the entire vehicle. So that can to a large extent take care of the efficiency as well as optimization. And in addition, of course, we looked at a couple of things like air pollution and social impact. But the key point I take home from what Vilas said is right sizing. If I were to just take one point from Jacob, the one point that sticks in my mind among 2 or 3 he said is the use of renewable energy when it comes to vehicles like his, which are lighter vehicles. From Aeros Travelers, that is Pradeep. Pradeep looked at it more as a look. It's not an easy question to answer. But we have to make sure that it's a holistic perspective. We don't just think about them in silos. That may not really lead to an optimal solution. And finally, Himanshu, some of the points he said were reaffirming what Vilas mentioned or Rahil mentioned. But one interesting point definitely was optimization of some of the key components. And the other thing I took was the ancillaries on the tangible side and the support system, be it infrastructure or the policies on the other side. So this is what it take back with me, guys. Been a wonderful 1 hour with you. What we are going to do is, as I mentioned, unlike other panel discussions, I want this to continue next time around. Now that we all know each other much better, we can probably schedule slightly ahead of time so that we all have been able to put together a proper time slot for this. I'm looking at maybe 2 to 3 weeks from now when we can have the next discussion. The point really is I'm going to circulate this after a couple of days, maybe 2, 3 days, all these points to you, and see how we can take this forward. Yeah, the next discussion can be looking at, okay, this is where innovations are required. Now, what should we do about it? That's obviously a much more difficult thing to do. I'm not saying we will have all the solutions. Nobody in the world might, but at least we can attempt it. That's the idea. Thank you once again, Rahil, Vilas, Pradeep, Jacob, Himanshu. I'm sorry I couldn't really be on the video, but then that's actually a pleasure that you didn't have to keep seeing me for 1 hour at a stretch. Thank you once again. I'll say I'll say bye right now, but I'm going to share this video maybe in 2-3 days once the whole thing is done, and once we take off a few glitches from the front and the back, we can probably put it together online. Is that okay?
Sure.
That's good.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having
Thank you.
us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Have a
Thank you,
great
Mr.
day.
Manoj.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye,
Have a
everyone.
great time. Bye.
Guys.